Hello and welcome to the Athletic NBA Show. It's Wednesday. It's Thanksgiving Eve. I'm Dave DeFore here with Seth Partnow and Mo DeKeel. This is Nerder, she wrote. And we decided this week to do a special Thanksgiving mailbag edition of the show. So thank you guys for submitting all your questions over at The Athletic. We did this as a subscriber mailbag. It was just honestly an easier way to organize, and I'm pretty overwhelmed with the response. We got 60 some odd comments and questions over at The Athletic. And right now is a perfect time, if you're not a subscriber, to go and subscribe. Go to theathletic.com/NBA show. You can sign up for just $1 a month. Maybe you're already a subscriber. Buy one for your dad. It's cheap, $12 for the whole year. And you get these pods advertising free. Always a good reason to subscribe to The Athletic. Guys,
and you get some great writers. And you get some great writers.
And you get some great writers. That's right.
Sam Amick, Zach Harper, yours
Mo
truly.
DeKeel. We had the X's and Mo's debut over the last week, and that was excellent stuff from Mo.
So you get great writers. There's no reason not to subscribe to The Athletic for $1 a month. I mean, this isn't even like, everybody says like, oh, it's your cup of coffee. It's not even your cup of coffee.
No, you can't get a cup of coffee for $1 anymore. So that being said, we got a ton of questions, and I guess we should jump right in. First question, and this is actually a really good question from Dan C. I'm a UK-based NBA fan and have been listening to the pod for the last few years. I still don't have an NBA team to follow. Help me out. Who should I follow? And Seth, like you said before we started, this is perfect because it's the opposite of how it normally goes.
Yeah, no, usually there's been for I want to say about 20 years almost, it's been wow, I'm just getting into soccer. Help me pick a Premier League team. I do think it is a little bit of a harder question because soccer clubs have a little bit more of a sort of a persistent character for the most part than NBA teams do. Just the regionalism of soccer teams, and also the promotion relegation system, and just how sort of stratified it is. So, I mean, aside from like, we're not going to tell you to be a Lakers fan. Like, aside from being a Lakers fan, there isn't like a team that is sort of in the same spot at all times. So it's a little bit of, you might pick a team for a reason, and then in 5 years, the team's identity will be completely different. But that's okay. We're not, I don't think we're fan fundamentalists here about telling you how you can be a fan of a team. So if you're picking a team to follow this year, I think or for the next couple of years, I think that's the best way to take the question.
This is actually a great year to pick a team, because I think you have a lot of options across the board. I think you can go anywhere from Oklahoma City. You can go Indiana, young teams. Like, my view of it is pick a young team that's fun and up and coming. And I think the best team to do that with is actually the Orlando Magic. I think they're just a lot of fun. I think they're on the cusp of being a play-in, maybe playoff team. I think you're having a lot more stuff there. I think you have Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner. Those two, just kind of as your cornerstones right now, are, really fun guys to root for. I think ultimately, like, if I was picking a team and I was this fan in the UK, I think I'd go with the Orlando Magic, just for the sheer fact of, like, this is a young, fun team, vibes well. I like their coach. I like Jamal Mosley. I think they have a lot of spirit there. Oklahoma City, also very fun, also easy. It's probably the last year to jump on the Oklahoma City bandwagon. Like, you're probably like doing the scene in the movies where you're chasing the wagon and making an amazing leap to catch onto it. But I think I think those are probably the two teams, and I throw Indiana as maybe the third place team. But I think fun young teams need to be who you're thinking about and to grow with. And I think this is a good spot. I would go with Orlando.
I think a UK fan, definitely stick to the East Coast, because if you're going to go visit, it makes it easy visit if you're going to go see some games. The one thing you have to worry about with Orlando, and I know English folks love Orlando and Disney World and all that, so maybe you just combine it all if you're a lover of that stuff. But that team may not be like even halfway decent in like 2 years. They don't have a good track record of success. So I would say you have to weigh the young and fun versus the how miserable do I want to be 8 years from now when I'm rooting for this team. And I think that's where I lean more toward like the Boston Celtics, the more traditional teams that stay kind of in the mix. And it really is about that trade-off. It's, do you want to root for Manchester United? That'd be like the Boston Celtics or Manchester City. Or do you want to root for Newcastle? Which like I did. And then we got new ownership, right? Like, so you maybe you root for the Orlando Magic. They're young and fun. And you're rooting for new ownership that actually keeps them consistent. I don't know. But the Orlando Magic right now have, if you're just looking for young and fun, they've got a good young defense, which is crazy. I think that's a pretty good choice. Atlanta is also not an awful choice. Trae Young's a fun guy to watch. Seth.
No, I love this question, and it's funny you said Newcastle, because the other, like, the standard answer is always been like, oh, Tottenham, because they've sort of been in the same like entertaining team, a tradition of being an entertaining team, and sort of good location, and just need a little bit of a tweak, and then they get, they this year up until they got some injuries and stuff had been one of the two or three best teams in the league with a new manager. Anyway, enough soccer. I think of these teams just from let's watch this team and watch them progress. I think Oklahoma City is the closest to sort of a fully formed team and would probably be the most satisfying over the next year or two. Indiana's tons of fun. Indiana's a great like drop in and watch, but they don't play any defense. And so there's sort of a ceiling on achievement. I think they're as good as as great as Tyrese Halliburton is. We are probably going to in the new year, probably going to start debating which, not just whether, but which all NBA team he's going to end up on this year. And Orlando is a little bit the reverse. And you mentioned the good defense, but their guard play is, if you combine those teams, like, do a merger and somehow get Halliburton throwing the ball to Banchero.
Right.
So that's why I would go with Oklahoma City.
I think it's too late on Oklahoma City. I just think like you didn't survive you're coming in now after the 2 years where they were just miserable. And like the team was rough and tanking and all of that stuff. I feel like with Orlando, like you say it with the guard play, they're just a guard away. Like, it's not like, and it's not even a massive one. I've said it many times. Like, that's who I want to see Malcolm Brogdon land. Like, that's where like, they're not far off in that sense. I mean, they're one guy setting the table for everybody away from being really, really freaking good. And I want to push back on Dave saying like, the track record in 2 years from now and whatnot. They've changed. Like, they actually made the smart moves when they traded Aaron Gordon, when they traded Vucevic, like they've actually, look how much better off they are than the Bulls in the trade that they made, and I think that's a massive win for them. And I think those are the things I'm looking at with them. And I just think when you're starting out as as a fan joining a team, I think this is the perfect starting point to jump in with them. I think, like I said, OKC, it's a little bit late to me. Indiana's fun. I just don't know how sustainable it is when you score 157 but give up 152. Like, there's a level of like, and it feels like a nightly basis. It's not. But when you have an amazing offense and a god-awful defense, it's like, what are we doing?
Yeah. All right. That was actually fun. Next question is from Tim in, and he mainly watches the Thunder and their pick and roll where they don't actually set a pick, but just kind of push or often touch and run by, usually for a pick and pop. And it looks weird to him. He says that he knows that they run a lot of small screens, but they do it with Chet too. Can you explain this, and if other teams are doing it as much? And Mo, I believe you did a one Mo thing on ghost screens at some point in the last year. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was actually going to say that. Like, this is just a ghost screen, and this is something every team does. And I think part of it is the strategy behind that is that, the defender's thinking, oh, a screen's coming, the guy who's on the ball and the guy guarding the screener, and they're getting ready to set that. And then, no, he just runs right by, whatever, brushes by and whatnot and peels out. Then it opens up a situation where then the defense is like, oh, crap. What we thought was going to happen didn't happen, and now we have to adjust again on the fly. And I think that leads to a lot of problems defensively. I think it's a great thing for offenses. I think it's great for OKC with just, with Chet being able to shoot. I think it's kind of perfect because it's usually him playing center. It's a big chasing him, most
Yeah.
likely.
The
And that's a hard adjustment for a big to make on the fly.
I think they like Oklahoma City has a good example of it. I think the prime realized example of it right now is Tatum and Porzingis. And we sort of like we're like, oh, is Boston actually running anything? And it's like sometimes they don't, but that's kind of a bread and butter thing that they've already discovered early this year. And it's what you're talking about. It's putting, it's okay. Porzingis is probably guarded by a bigger guy. How do you guard Tatum? He might actually set a screen. So how does the defender play that? Or do you switch it and now Tatum is going against a big, or Porzingis gets a small on him and can run him into the post, which is something he's gotten better at. And so it's, I think Mo, you and I, this show is actually, we talk about like not loving soft switches, but on like the ghost screen, like it's almost like,
you kind of have to.
You almost have to. So it's almost if you have a guy with the ball who can shoot off the dribble, it almost lets you pick your defensive matchup at times. And so that's why it does, if you're used to sort of the Stockton to Malone, it does look weird and like, why aren't they? But
that's what I was gonna say. I mean, this is just, it's a different style of screen, right? Like when we talk about screening, we typically talk about making contact, getting good seals and stuff like that. Like when we talk about Ayton and the fact that he never makes contact, the ghost screen works because they don't know that the ghost screen's coming, right? The idea is they need to be ready for either, and it's almost like a hesitation dribble. You can get the defense to just freeze for a second, and now all of a sudden you've got room when you pop, or you've got room to drive against that switch.
It's much closer to like a handoff or dribble handoff than it is, because it's giving you to make a football analogy, it's like a triple option, because you can like the two defenders are having to defend at least three different things, and that puts you in you can still guard it, but the more options you're making them counter, the more chances there is to make a mistake. And then if you have a great shooter setting a great versatile shooter setting the screen, like Porzingis and Holmgren is becoming that, and an A+ guy with the ball like Tatum and Shea, both who are certainly in the first team All NBA conversation. It's just a very tough action to guard.
Yep. Next question from Stan H. With players such as Halliburton and Şengün thriving now, that were drafted lower in the lottery, but were very skilled clearly going into the draft, I wonder if teams will look to adjust their draft strategies a bit and look less at raw athleticism and more at ball skills. Take the Warriors, for instance. If they had taken LaMelo and I'm assuming Franz Wagner instead of the more athletic and raw Wiseman and Kuminga, they would possibly be in a better place right now. What do you guys think about that? Do we care more? I mean, we talk a lot about tall ball now, but it's really skill ball.
I mean, the flip side of that is, Anthony Edwards was a guy who had some skill, but still needed to develop. And it was mostly based on not mostly, but I mean, his potential is the skill plus his overwhelming physical abilities. So, you can pick and choose your endpoints kind of, but, at the very top, you still need that athletic pop, I think.
It's so hard. This question is so hard in the sense of like, in hindsight, yes, the Warriors screwed up massively with the picks that they made, right? Like, just think about how amazing that team would be with Franz Wagner, right? Like, we're just sitting there going like, this would be a whole different level. But it's just one of those things. First off, the draft is kind of a crapshoot. And we've seen some dudes that are skilled guys that go later that don't pop, right? Like, it's easy to point out the Halliburtons. It's easy to point out, Şengün and things like that. But like, there's also guys that don't pop. And we also understand that, like, how many times we see these dudes in the playoffs. And I'm not talking about those two guys, but like, they're not athletic enough to be on the floor. They're slow. They're plotting and things like there's just an element of that. I think it all comes down to your team. What's your current construction? What do you need? What are you looking for? I think sometimes teams are leaning too heavily on potential versus realization, but also if you're drafting in the lottery, even in the late lottery, you may not be looking for a guy that can be you need a refined piece. You might be saying, hey, we need a guy that's just going to pop and be a guy we can develop over the next couple of years. Like Edwards is a great example, Seth. Like that's a dude, perfect example of the other way. And I think it really is just dependent on teams, the situation they're in, what their long-term plans are and stuff. It's just hard. And I think coming into the draft with these hard rules sometimes, I think is dumb for teams. And I think that makes it difficult.
And I would say Halliburton and like Desmond Bain, those guys are a little bit different because they were already good and they improved a lot. Like they improved like you would expect a guy on a star trajectory to improve. And Şengün is, I mean, this could be that season where he's making a leap. That's still pretty rare. You're not getting a lot of guys that fall out of the lottery that wind up in this position. I mean, overall, I think NBA teams do a pretty good job with this. The Warriors just have like this one glaring, like absolutely massive.
The Wiseman, the Wiseman over Melo is a very particular, and that's not even maybe you didn't like maybe you decided you didn't like LaMelo Ball, which is fair enough. We've talked about this a bunch, but a guy as inexperienced as Wiseman, putting him in like sort of the highest decisions per minute situation in the league. It was never, you were always asking for a hard time there.
We should also note too, it was the 2020 draft. Like if we're going to hold that on them, we got to acknowledge that draft, information wise, teams were at a massive disadvantage in terms of what they were getting, and I think that was a challenging thing just in that one situation for the Warriors and a couple other teams. But I think ultimately, like I said, it's just so team dependent. I just think having hard rules is a difficult thing going into the draft. We never draft this, or we only draft these guys. Like
I'm only drafting 4-year players.
Yeah. And those two examples, like if you want to, like Halliburton was a guy that a lot of people liked, but I don't think even his strongest backer would have predicted he could become this sort of, like, you thought he might be like a really high level connector, and his development as a sort of primary, like heliocentric offensive, offensively dominant. Like he's sort of become what people were maybe in a different style perhaps, but like what people were hoping Cade Cunningham would be. And that's what Halliburton has become. And that's, just from a standpoint of getting his own shot, he's progressed already well beyond what, was really projectable coming in. And then Şengün, I think that he's taken an athletic improvement that I think is unusual. I think there was an article that just came out in was it The Ringer, talking about his work at P3. And I think that's not necessarily something you can always count on. But I think he was a guy who, again, was super productive, killed draft models, and people liked him. But I think that especially at the position he plays, like that big step change in his athleticism has unlocked so much of his game.
And with Şengün, I think like I've already seen it this season, as he hesitates less, especially on that pick and pop 3, I think more things are even going to open up. Like he may take a couple of mini leaps this season. I mean, we'll see how Amen Thompson works out when he gets healthy, but he's probably going to be their best playmaker this season as far as decision maker. So Şengün. So I think that there's even more juice to be squeezed out of him this season, where he's just coming around.
And I think for him, the athleticism is as much about making him a two-way player, which is, I think, important as at it, that big spot. In a way, it might be less so for Halliburton.
Yeah. Also, Şengün, there are mixtapes out there with Şengün catching bodies like over and over and over again. So for a guy who hadn't played a whole lot, who we consider, to lack athleticism, I mean, he's got a pretty good highlight reel. So, definitely go find that on the internet. All right, let's move on. Next question from Robert P. The Mavs seem to like to fall behind early and then come roaring back. However, the roaring back part doesn't work too well against the better teams. Is this just Kidd trying to figure out his rotation and players he can trust, or is it something else? Is Kidd the right leader for this team? Now, that's a loaded question.
I'm gonna duck the back half of that question and more say that I think Dallas is a team that I think we are in agreement that we're expecting some regression from. In part because of what he's talking about and the fact that it works better against bad teams and good teams. And Dallas has the most wins against teams under 35 win pace of any team in the league. As of yesterday, they were 6-0. No other team had more than 5 wins.
And that's a good thing. You got to beat the bad teams.
Yeah, but at the same time, they were 1-3 against the good teams. So against the top level teams. And so that's a worry. And also they had, they're 2 games above like their clutch expectancy. And so those wins count, but you can't necessarily count on them the rest of the year. So I think they've done really well. I just unless Derek Lively really is that much of a stabilizing force as a mid first round rookie, I don't wonder about whether the talent level is enough to be more than about the 6th seed.
Yeah, you can get away with that against bad teams. Let's just be honest. In that sense of falling behind and then catching up. I mean, how many blown leads have the Spurs had this season? I mean, it feels like they've had more blown leads than actual games they've played. And it's just, that's the thing you can get away with only so many times. And you can't get away with that against good teams. Fall behind against Denver, fall behind against Minnesota, fall behind against Oklahoma City. Good luck catching them. I think the talent disparity on that roster is pretty clear with that. And Luka's been great. I just don't know how long he can keep that up. And I think that's a massive challenge for the Mavs in terms of trying to figure out what they're doing and how everything's rolling. I think that's a big one for them. Is Kidd the right guy for this team? I don't know. He doesn't have a great roster around him. I don't know I don't know what coach is going to do, going to overperform with that roster. There are a lot of holes for me on that roster that I just look at going they started out great, but I don't know, man.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Is the consensus too low on the Phoenix Suns' chance of winning the title? Acknowledging defense and health concerns, picturing Beal, Gordon taking open corner threes in place of Okogie, Payne, Paul, etc. against Denver makes it hard to envision how they'll be defended. What do you guys think? Is the consensus too low on Phoenix? I mean, I think right now to start the season, we've all been disappointed, but there's injury stuff. But this is all kind of what we expected. They don't have many guys. I mean, it's just,
I think the consensus is still too high.
Yeah.
I think I mean, the open corner 3, but that's fine. That's 2 shots a game where you're shooting 40% instead of 35%. That's neat. And every other possession, would you rather have Brad Beal or Josh Okogie guarding the other teams? Probably their second best player, since Booker seems to be, and credit to him, seems to be taking on. And frankly, you might want to give him some breaks and have Okogie chase the main guy a little bit. So no, I don't. That's why we didn't love the Beal deal. Is just if you're telling him to stand in the corner and shoot threes, you probably do better from that spot with a guy who's does not have as much athletic talent or as offensive talent, because you're not really using most of his talent.
Yeah, I think we tend to lean on so much of but they're going to get so many open threes and this is going to be, and how are everybody's going to guard everything and stuff like that. Man, they'll figure that stuff out. It's first off, if you're telling me my playoff life depends on Josh Okogie in the corner, I'm looking for insurance. I'm scared. That's an issue in that sense. It's not something, and yeah, he could shoot it well from the corner. Eric Gordon's going to get all these threes. Eric Gordon was also on a team that missed 27 straight threes in a game, in a game 7. I'm just saying, we always kind of bank on that stuff. For me, I look at it, defense matters so much in the playoffs, so much more than we actually care to acknowledge. And it's so different in the regular season versus the playoffs. But the Denver Nuggets had a great offense. There also was really freaking good defensively. And I think that matters a ton. And I think that's the stuff we're looking at. So when I look at Phoenix, I don't see it. I still don't see it with Nurkic, although he's playing really well offensively. I still have questions of what's going to happen for them in the playoffs with him. I don't think they have enough guys. People want to talk about let's take the health out. You can't with these guys. Bradley Beal always misses a ton of games. Booker misses games, and KD has missed a bunch of games over the past few years. Like, health is such a massive thing for them. Like, I don't even know if we're going to have a healthy Phoenix Suns roster. And even if we did, I don't think they make a difference in the playoffs beyond being like a second round team.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I just don't think they have enough. I didn't think they have enough coming into the season. The Beal thing is funny. Like, if they could replace Beal with 2 pretty good players, 3, I think that they're a little bit better off. And I know that's contrary to what we've been taught, right? But if they had Dorian Finney-Smith and maybe 2 other like high-level role players, you could see like this team would just have a little bit more balance.
I'm smiling because like that's what we said going into the offseason is they need to trade Ayton for a couple good, and they traded Ayton for a couple and
not couple good though.
I mean,
that's the thing, right?
That was the thing. I mean, I couldn't be any lower on Ayton. And I was screaming how dumb that was and didn't understand it for them. Remember, I went on the podcast and said, you got to take them out of the contender status. Like, that's not a championship starting center in Yusuf Nurkic. And maybe he was 3 years ago, but he ain't now. And I think that's just a massive one.
Yeah, defense is going to be a problem for them come playoff time. All right, next question. Speaking of problems, Robert R. asked, what can Detroit do to right their sinking ship? Are there any solutions to the construction of the current roster? Curious as to our take and the current projection of the team as a whole. Detroit's kind of a mess, guys.
Yeah, draft more centers. Just draft more centers. Yeah. That's all they're going to. Just draft more centers.
I would start with this. You're a young, bad team. You just hired Monty Williams. You gave him a 6-year contract, which means he has a ton of stability. He doesn't have to worry about his job. You're not good enough to win any games as it is. Why are we just not getting Ivy and Sasser and Duran? I mean, just overwhelm me with minutes for the young guys. Work through all these problems while there's no expectation. Figure out what you got. We just know who Killian Hayes is at this point. I've seen it. I need to know who your other guys are.
I can't. I mean, I've done this almost on every podcast I've been on. I've done this in my writing. I've done this in my power rankings. The fact Kevin Knox gets more minutes than Jaden Ivey or Marcus Saucer is criminal. Like, you bad enough you're giving minutes to Killian Hayes, who we know already. You went and signed Kevin Knox,
who you know already,
to take more minutes away from guys. Like, I mean, it's a level of frustration with this team and this roster, and like the whole idea of, you got to earn the minutes, your defense matters or whatnot, and things like that. Ain't nobody playing defense on that team. I haven't been impressed with their defense. I haven't walked away from like, I understand what Monty Williams is doing. Killian Hayes' defense is so absolutely amazing that, it outweighs the cons on offense, and we can give up on the draft pick that it was the 5th pick, Ivy. I can't remember the 5th pick. Like, you're just blowing these things. You find a gem in Marcus Saucer late in the draft, as the question earlier said. Like, that's a guy that's a gem, and you're not even giving him minutes. And development is all about minutes. Most important thing in development is minutes. It's the lifeblood of player development, and they simply are throwing that stuff away. And it's just frustrating to watch. Like, it's a frustrating watch for me.
Also, I want to just say this about their offense. It's a black hole. Every single person they had, I watched the game over the weekend. It was dribble down the court, make no passes. I'll give Kevin Knox credit. He was one of the few guys trying to make plays for other people. He actually did try to move the ball, had a nice hammer pass to the corner. Cade Cunningham, man, that guy dribbles into the lane. There is no passing the ball, and maybe it's because he doesn't have teammates that he trusts. But I would start there. I'd say, hey, how about sharing the ball a little bit on offense, and let's play our better young players that have some high upside. Alec Burks, fine player. I like Alec Burks a lot. If Alec Burks was playing for, the Golden State Warriors, or if he was playing for the LA Lakers, fantastic. But for this young, bad team, you've got a veteran eating minutes that are crucial to development, as Mo just said. So I'm now reiterating Mo, but they drive me nuts to watch. It's not good basketball in any way. I don't see how anyone's learning even.
It was either John Schumann or John Hollinger. I don't remember which came out with the stat. John with the stat that in every clutch game Detroit has played this year, they've scored fewer than 1 point per possession in their clutch possessions. And this is just a little bit what you're talking about. When it gets down to it, they don't have any way of either individually or collectively creating an advantage. I want to just finish up on this by saying it's a little bit galaxy brain that they're more all in on their second draft guys than they are on the guys they actually drafted. It's like the second draft is an interesting idea. The jury is very much out on whether it's actually a thing, whether a guy who, guys who don't fit in their first place can turn in a better place. Like, a success story of that might be like what Cam Reddish is doing in LA, where he's sort of become a very interesting defensive wing, which was always his best attributes as a prospect anyway. But instead it's just like, well, Marvin Bagley didn't work. Let's sign him to a bunch of money and he'll work out here. Bring Kevin Knox in. He was a highly thought of recruit and draft pick. And it's just like, what? But these guys have already put a body of work in that is, at least the unknown of an Ivy or a Sasser. Like, let's explore that.
You're not going anywhere.
Bagley's okay. Like, Bagley has actually worked out, I think, okay. Like, I mean, he's been pretty productive, but again, it's in the way of progress to a certain degree. Next question, I want to get to it because it's a big one, and I want to make sure we have time. And it's a little almost a two-parter because it goes well with the next question. From James R. There's been a general media consensus that losing good players for nothing is bad asset management. And he's wondering if the new second apron rules might change this. And he goes into, I mean, this is a great question. This is why I love, doing these mailbags, because you guys really get us thinking. So here's a couple of points that he makes. Currently, the worst contracts, in his opinion, are the supermax contracts for players who are not the best player on their team. Think Karl Anthony Towns next season, okay? And I'm not necessarily agreeing with it, but I get the thinking. Are we going to now see expanded to max contract for non-stars? Now, he says think Siakam. Look, Siakam's a star. That's an all-NBA player. If he's not a star, I don't know who is.
Masai Ujiri's burner?
I understand what he's saying here. So, essentially, it's almost like max contract inflation that we dealt with. Do you guys think, and I think this is what he's asking, the second apron is going to prevent some of these bad, quote unquote, bad max, the fake maxes, from being handed out? I'm not sure if it will.
I think my guess is it's more likely going to have an adjacent effect to that, which is like, okay, well, we've got these guys signed and our very productive sixth guy is coming up and we just can't do it. I think that's more because I do think the second apron is going to be treated as a de facto hard cap by most teams. And, it's the same thing as the original, the original luxury tax. Like at a certain point, like your team has got to be pretty good to want to justify that. Now with all the mechanical, impacts of going that high, like your team already be pretty good because there's not a lot of ways to improve it once you're above that high. I do think that the general media consensus, it's a good rule of thumb. Don't let good players leave for nothing. I think it's become too much of a fundamental. I think that, and we'll get into this more in the next question, but I think that sort of turning over your non-star guys and having guys who can come in behind and fill those roles on more affordable contracts is better asset management than, well, shit, we got to re-sign our guys.
And a lot of times this asset management is about managing the salary cap. Like if you're above, if you're above the salary cap, you want to stay above the salary cap. So when you go into the summer, you want to be above the salary cap so that you can do, you get other tools in your tool bag. So that's a reason to not let guys walk. You don't necessarily want to be a cap room team. If you're going into the summer as a contender, especially because free agency has just been killed by the extension. Teams are trading more and more every year for star players rather than signing them outright in free agency.
I think we're still going to see these max contracts for guys like Tobias Harris and whatnot. And, like we're going to still see these massive overpays for guys. And we're going to go like, oh, okay, that was a lot. And I think a lot of it's going to be also teams going, hey, we're probably going to trade you in a year. Like, just honestly, how comfortable do you feel if the Boston Celtics don't win a championship? How confident do you feel Jaylen Brown's going to be on the roster next year?
I think that, and he follows up here by saying, I look at the NHL where the hard cap has teams trading very good players away and having to attach picks so that other teams will eat the salary. So is it possible some very good players get traded for expirings just to get teams out of the second apron? I think that may be true. We may wind up in a world where, similar to baseball, about 10 years ago, you'd sign a guy to a 4-year massive contract. Halfway through the season, hey, we're not going to make the playoffs, and you can see guys get moved that early. I mean, I don't think it'll get to that point in the NBA just because individual stars matter so much more to winning than basically any other sport. But there's a world in which maybe like your third guy, you sign a guy to be your third guy, and you're looking to move him out because it's not hitting. I think maybe faster decision making may be a side part of this, and
also planning so you don't get yourself in that situation again. And I think that gets us to our next question. So
yeah, I'll go ahead and jump on that next question. Michael M asks the perfect follow-up here.
Asks about his bench. Michael M asking about his bench.
Yeah, Michael M. Is that Michael Malone? Yeah, maybe. The Nuggets off-season decision to save money by loading the roster with second-round picks initially looked promising, but seems more questionable as soon as Murray got injured. It reminds me of the Warriors' failed 2-timeline plan. How do you view the Nuggets bench, and how would you expect Denver to ride it out or look to add depth before the trade deadline? And I just want to start this by saying, if you're the Denver Nuggets and you've lost Jamal Murray, well, we've seen this before. That's a tough hill to climb. And I don't know if you can judge your bench when Murray's not out there, because all of a sudden everyone's bounced up a roll. So I'm not too worried about how they've performed with Murray out, but it is a fascinating question.
I mean, I'll go further than that. It's, if you're Denver, you're repeat or bust for a championship. Everything you're planning is, you have to assume, what does this look like with Jokic and Murray healthy? Because if they're not healthy, it doesn't matter. So why are you spending any time examining what that looks like?
I mean, this is just the question of, like, if they had kept Bruce Brown and Jeff Green, and Murray was out, they're still losing the championship. They're still not. Nobody feels confident they'd win the championship. Like, it doesn't. It's so much about the top level talent. Now, yes, those bench guys are going to be really important in the playoffs. They're going to have to step up and make plays and things like that. But I think it's just smart preparation on their end for that, and understanding that, we can't pay Bruce Brown. What was it? 2 years, $40 million. Like, we just simply,
I think
we just simply can't do that. Like, it's not feasible for us. And I think that's one of those things there where I think they were smart and looking ahead. And it goes back to, again, how the teams are going to operate with the second apron coming around. But it also, I think, is an important thing that the NBA has kind of gotten away from a little bit. Develop your players. Peyton Watson's been really good, and he's going to have up and down struggles because he's a young guy, but that's part of development. Christian Brown, same thing. And he had big moments in the finals and the playoffs for them. I think there's a lot of stuff there, but I think looking at it this way, like for the Nuggets, and we've said it several times, the road to the finals is as long as Jokic, Murray, Gordon, and I'll even throw MPJ out there, are healthy. That's their road to the finals. They might survive if MPJ goes down, but they won't survive if the other three go down.
Right.
So I think,
and let's give KCP some love. Come on, man. You got to name the whole starting lineup.
KCP go down. Yeah. They'll survive if KCP goes down.
The flip side of this, and this is, we've kind of debated some of Memphis's moves before last year. And I think that they were attempting sort of a similar thing, and they kind of got hit with the double whammy of, first of all, Melton is he better than Bruce Brown? Maybe same level, maybe certainly not worse, but also was on a more, was not the same level of contract. And then also they just you've talked about the development guys. They've basically from their draft and development of that group coming in behind, they basically struck out. So how does this look different if David Roddy or Zaire Williams or Jake LaRavia are showing some promise? It looks a lot different. And is that a failure of development? Is that a failure of talent identification? I don't know. But it's the theory was similar. I think that Denver has just executed better. And both in terms of who they chose to let go. And it seems like either picking or developing or both of those kind of younger guys.
Yeah, I feel like someone should throw like 15 million at Lane Vashro. That's what I would do if I were running the NBA team. I definitely would hire away the entire draft squad from the Denver Nuggets. Those guys are they're on top of it. Hey, you know what, guys? We got 2 Wizards questions, which I was shocked by. I didn't realize people were even watching the Wizards outside of watching it like a train wreck. So I'm going to ask both of these questions because hey, shout out to the
probably
Wizards
never going to talk about them after this.
I mean, I really wanted to talk about this Jordan Poole like running down the clock when you're losing by 10 thing.
Oh.
It's one of the most perfect player signature moments in NBA history. If that's not a Jordan Poole move.
Nick Young walked so Jordan Poole could fly. Like let's just
listen, man. That was just impressive tanking. Okay, Lazarus O asks, will the Wizards set an unprecedented record of losses where they've allowed 140 plus points? They've already got 3 such losses. Does this make them one of the worst teams ever? Well, we happen to have a numbers guy. Seth did the numbers, and I'm going to go out on a limb, Seth, and say that the Washington Wizards will not allow 140 plus points 24 or more times like the Denver Nuggets did. What year was that?
90-91. That was when they had Paul Westhead, and they tried to bring the Loyola Marymount style to
the system
to the NBA. And I mean, to be fair to that Nuggets team, they were very bad defensively. They are also the highest paced team. They played at about 115 possessions per game, which
where would that be in the league now?
It would be first. I mean, the league is at the
by
highest pace by about I don't know by about how much, probably about 10 possessions a game. The league as a whole is at just right around 100 right now. So it's another 15% on top of what is a extremely high pace environment that we're playing in now. So even if you scale that to like defensive rating of games over 130, last year's Blazers had 21 games where they allowed a defensive rating of 130 or more. And I believe the Wizards have done it 2 or 3 times this year.
The Pacers have allowed 150 twice already this season.
And won
once.
Yeah.
we are in a totally different world when you're scoring that much in regulation. I mean, this is just, the defense is not existent in the NBA right now. Second part of this question. That one was just fun. Dean H., who doesn't expect any Wizards talk, but he wants a minute on how comically bad this Wizards team is and how terrible of a situation it is in DC. The team on the court could be the worst since Abe Pollin sold the team. Off the court, fan apathy is probably at an all-time high, and that's really saying something for the Washington Wizards.
This is paying the piper of not dealing Beal sooner.
Right. This is making that mistake in that sense. But I also think, look, this team's awful. They know they're awful. They have set themselves up to have possible trade assets. I think, whether Kuzma gets dealt this year at the deadline or in the offseason, there are going to be teams lining up for them. This is what it looks like when you're beginning to demo the house. Right. And I think this is what they're doing. I mean, get ready, Washington, for like a long rebuild. I'll give you this, though. I'll give you a little bit bright spot, like one shiny, tiny bit of light. I really enjoy Bilal Coulibaly.
He can play.
And he's further ahead than I think anybody even expected, including the Wizards. Like, I think, he's shooting it at a pretty high level. He looks comfortable. He makes the right passes. He swings the ball. He drives when he's supposed to. He's defending. He's doing all the small things. Unfortunately, he's not going to get a lot of touches. because Jordan Poole's there trying to run out the clock, even though it's not running, or the other way around. It is. I forget this. It was so dumb. I don't even remember fully what happened.
Well, he didn't know the play. He didn't play. He doesn't pay attention during timeouts, Mo.
No, I mean, there's just so many things with that. But like, they are setting themselves up to be able to now doing it late, but they're setting themselves up to try to. Hey, I think they're trying to make sure they're in position to not this draft, but next draft get Cooper Flag. And I think
lower the flag. Or raise the white flag
or,
for Cooper
or Cam Boozer.
I don't know what we're doing here for Cooper Flag, but you're doing something.
Yeah, they're playing around with a lot of this stuff, and I think the what you're watching for right now is like it is comically bad. It's awful. Like it's just not. It's a
but
tough
embrace
watch.
it.
But
you're going to see Jordan Poole do something insane almost every single night that we've never seen before. So just embrace it. It's fun.
You're going to see the dumbest thing on a nightly basis. Like it's sort of like how when we talk about watching Wemby and even Chet to a degree when we see stuff going like, I didn't know you could do that. It's the other way around with him.
Except it's like, it's more going to be Poole saying, I didn't know you couldn't do that.
Right. I think there's I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there, but like it's going to be tough in Washington for a while. Like this is the start of the rebuild. It's long overdue. They've been resistant to do it. They're finally doing it, and now it's gonna be painful for a little bit.
I mean, this is your New Year's resolution. How bad you feel when you go back to the gym for the first time, and
right.
it's like you feel terrible, but it's better you did than you didn't. And they're late on this rebuild, but at least they've kind of not only have chosen this path, but have turned over their leadership, and the new leadership clearly has a mandate to go down this path. So if you are sick of sort of being stuck on not even quite the middle, like where you're gunning for that 9th seed every year, and now. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's be real bad and then hopefully get good again in the future. At least you started on that path.
Yeah. I mean, and look, the best time to start a rebuild for a bad team is a year ago, right? Second best time yesterday. Might as well start today. And this is actually the first, this is objectively the first year of what's going to be a 2 or 3, maybe 4-year rebuild. I think this year will probably be the least amount of fun for Wizards fans because it's just Bilal, and that's about it. That's like the only hope you've got.
And he's sort of a side dish this year,
right?
Whereas next year, like if it's like this guy's interesting, and maybe next year's the year he's like, this might be a dude.
You're right. You're honestly hoping, if you're Washington fans, they move Kuzma at the deadline. They find a taker for Poole in the offseason. I mean, like, I don't know if you will, but I know you're shaking your head.
If I'm trying to get a top 3, if I'm trying to get a top 3 draft pick, Jordan Poole is the captain of my team.
I mean,
I'm putting we want a 35 usage. I want him taking 20 shots a game. There's no one I can think of who's more well suited to lose 70 games in a season.
No, but I think the problem is you also need to develop your guys as you're going through.
Right.
And that's just not happening. Like, I'll just be like, it was a few weeks ago, but there was I think it was the Toronto Washington game. Bilal Coulibaly comes in the first quarter, 4 minutes left. I'm almost positive he didn't have a single touch. I'm almost positive he didn't touch the ball for 4 minutes. And I think that even includes inbounding. Like, it's just like, that's the problem. But you just want to hope they really do strip these things, tear this thing down to the studs, even if it means moving Denny, like whatever. Like, it's right now, you need to just start to being at the very bottom to get started. It's going to be a long process. I don't know how people will feel about saying trust the process, but this is what the deal is for that.
Also, I think if you are going to say trust though, they do have, Mike Winger is a very well-respected front office, came from Oklahoma City and the Clippers. And so I think that there is more reason to, it's not sort of a member of kind of the they used to call it in Minnesota, they used to call it the country club, whereas everyone kind of came out of the same circle, and Washington has sort of turned that over as well. I will say I think I'm a little more with Dave than with Mo on the tanking thing, just because I don't think you have enough of your go forward guys even on the roster yet to for the reps to like it's Kubalali and that's kind of it.
That's
Yeah.
enough. That's enough.
I
You're going to
agree.
lose
I
70
think
games
it's-
still. You're still going
point-
to lose. You're
point
gonna have the
taken.
same result.
Yeah. I just feel, honestly, I feel bad for Wes Unseld Jr. I mean, a head coach, a young head coach being in that position. I'm hoping that like we hear some extension news where they're just like, hey, we know this is bad.
You know they're not. I mean, they're
I
setting
know.
up for failure, and it's
Yeah.
a massive problem.
I really,
around the
I
league
mean,
when they do that with guys and things like that. Like that's just let's just be honest. And this isn't on West. That's a losing culture being set in Washington. Nobody coming down on pools, not paying attention in the timeouts, and then trying to find out at the last second what the play is. Like that needs to be dealt with on several levels. And I mean, that's the stuff. That's a losing culture that they're setting up. And that's actually, to be honest, the downfall of Brett Brown.
yeah.
You wanna
Oh,
talk about
100%.
And it's
Yeah.
you got to be careful with it playing out. I got to give Oklahoma City credit. I went nuts on them a year or two ago. Remember? And I think you got to look at what they've done with Mark Dagnall. Like he's done a great job, and they've also, in the process of tanking, developed guys. And I think that's been an important thing. And he's a great coach. And I think that's an important aspect with that. And I think you're seeing the fruits of that. And I don't think Washington is going to do that with Wes. And even if they get close to being good, they'll fire him.
How about that? That's more than 1 minute on the Washington Wizards. Also, let's rebrand. Be the Bullets again. Come on. Let's just
Be the Generals for a year.
Yeah,
in name as well as
the Wizards got to go. Like let's just rebrand the whole thing. Like lose the stink. A couple more questions. Rob R asks, if Fox finishes the year like he has started, is he a legitimate MVP candidate? Seth, we'll kind of talk numbers a little bit. I mean, he's at like 35-5 roughly. The shooting numbers are pretty good. I think he's 48% on twos or overall, about 38% from three. The numbers are there. Like these are all NBA numbers. I think with the MVP, you have to split hairs, and that's when it gets into winning.
I think
do they win enough
7-1
games?
with him though?
Right.
Like I was gonna be like, well, are they gonna win enough? Well, since he kind of has come back in the lineup, yes, they're winning all their games. So
yes,
they kind of had it. They scuffled to start the season, and now he's back, and they're not. So I was initially like, nah. But if he keeps playing this way and they win, they win 80% of their games with him playing, then yeah, he'll be right there. Now I think that that's sort of like a little bit like Mose. If all these things happen, then Wemby will be defensive player of the year, which that's not to pick on you, Mo. I think Wemby is we've talked about Wemby's done everything he possibly could, and it's just too much other stuff around him. So the weird thing is though, is like there's still like the almost the subtle debate of did they pick the wrong point guard, and I think that's a little bit tough on them, just because how good Halliburton has become now that he's been given the keys in Indiana. But Fox has been great, and
I just don't think the difference is that much. I think ideally, and Mo, you probably agree with me here. Ideally, they would have just had both. Like, the Sabonis trade. Look, Sabonis has been a great player for them. He's a really, really productive regular season guy. But Mo, like the thing that is going to hold them back in the playoffs is going to be Sabonis, right? Like, and you could imagine a world where if they had both of those guys, it might go easier. But I mean, Mo, what Fox has done and what he does in the fourth quarter in particular, I think stands out. And when it comes to the MVP talk, if they're top three in the West and he's still putting up 30 points a game and leading these fourth quarter charges, I mean, he's going to get votes, right, Mo?
Yeah, listen, my appetite for MVP talk in November is very, very low.
And you know me, I mean, I haven't eaten any turkey. I can't talk about MVP, but I'm just asking, we're asking a question about the end of the season.
I get it. But it's also like really projecting so far out of what can happen. Like there's it's too tough for me. Now, look, there's an element like he's going to get votes if they're a top three team, as same with Shea if OKC's a top three team, Anthony Edwards if the Wolves are a top three team. Like it's such a I'll say this about the MVP field right now. It's quite wide when you look at in terms of at least the top 5, right? Any order of Jokic, Embiid, Tatum, Giannis, Fox, Shea, Edwards. There's probably other guys I'm leaving out, like that have legitimate shots at it.
Luka,
I think there's just so much.
LeBron.
Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
This is the
we can
wild,
name half the league.
this is the wildest thing so far. So like this early, it's so wide that it's like for me, and I'm just going to just say like we got to wait till this thing filters down because guys will take themselves out of it on their own.
Yeah.
Can I propose a rule?
No.
Really?
Okay, I'm going to anyway. The Elam ending. No. The no MVP talk until after the in-season tournament championship game.
No, tell the calendar.
I really think it's kind of New Year's. I think
Well,
it's after
but
Christmas.
I mean, but it's going to get talked about on Christmas Day, and so it's not.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way:
Not
I'd rather
by us.
I'd rather MVP talk than who's the next star to get traded talk, or this star who's about to play
Agreed.
in this game on TV. When will he get traded? I'd rather we talk about the MVP than that.
I'd rather we
Much
talk
better.
about the games.
Yeah.
But the
There you go.
the more
All right,
I'm not going to let the perfect be enemy of good here.
That's right. All right, I got one last question, guys, and this one, Mo, you said you want to talk about the game. Sorry, we're going to talk about Thanksgiving sides from Benjamin A.
talking about food. This is great. I love this.
Please analogize NBA players with Thanksgiving sides. This is the last question, by the way. I thought we'd end on something fun here. You guys have any NBA sides for players? I actually did this over on YouTube. I don't know if it's up yet, but we had a little fun with this the other day.
This is an area where I'm not very good at analyzing making the
I'll say this.
analogy.
Mason Plumlee is green bean casserole.
Go on.
That's it. I mean, I don't need to explain it. Everyone already knows.
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, the Clippers are missing. I've never missed green bean casserole when it's not there.
Okay.
I try to actively avoid it, but okay.
I don't know that they're missing.
Well, let's do it this way. First, what's your favorite sides at Thanksgiving? I'm going to hijack the question here a little.
Oh man, they started on Buds with this the other day. I mean, like the best sides are. Stuffing. I mean, does pumpkin pie count as a side? I don't know.
It's a dessert.
Pumpkin pie is a dessert. Yeah, it's probably stuffing, and it has to be the right kind of stuffing. Well, do you do stuffing or dressing? Stuffing's in the bird, dressing's in a pan.
We're doing. I guess we're doing dressing this year because
dressing's better because it's crispy.
I'm not cooking a whole bird, so
I am going with mashed potatoes and gravy. It's just perfect, and then because you could turkey can be a little bit dry, but then you can dip it in the gravy with the mashed potatoes. Kind of fixes a lot of things there, so that's a big one for me. I love a good mac and
Curry and Draymond Green.
No, I was going to say mashed potatoes and gravy is Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr.
Ooh, to the turkey that is Nikola Jokic.
Yeah.
Jokic is a turkey.
That's pretty good. All right, we don't have any answers for this one. That one was just fun. Anyway,
we will not make the butterball joke because he's moved well beyond that.
No,
that's
good.
right. Anyway, from Seth and Mo and myself and everybody at the Athletic NBA Show, just want to wish you guys a happy Thanksgiving. Everybody, be safe if you're on the road.
Safe travels.
Yeah, it's nuts out there. I've already seen the airport lines are crazy, and obviously holiday travel is. It's going to be hectic. So everybody stay safe. Have a good turkey day. Eat too much, sleep too much, get some rest. And thanks for listening to the Athletic NBA Show.